Good afternoon, everyone. We are pleased to welcome you to today's EHS Daily Advisor webinar, How to Build a High-Performance Safety Culture and Engage Your Workforce Through Safety Action Teams, brought to you by EnPro Learning System. This is a 60-minute program. Before we get started, we wanted to cover a few housekeeping items. At the bottom of your audience console are multiple application widgets that you can use. If you have any questions during the webcast, you can click on the Q&A widget at the bottom and submit your question. We will try to answer these during the webcast, but if a fuller answer is needed or if we run out of time, it will be answered later via email. We do capture all questions. A copy of today's slide deck is available in the resource list widget that looks like a green folder at the bottom of your screen. If you experience any technical difficulty, please click on the help widget. It has a question mark icon and covers common technical issues. An on-demand version of this webcast will be available approximately 1 day after the event and can be accessed using the same audience link that was sent to you earlier. Your guest speaker for today is Jonathan Neubauer, CSP, Director of Safety and Organizational Change for EnPro Learning System. Jonathan first began working in the safety field in 2005 when he began to offer fall protection and rescue training and consulting services to several wind energy development companies. In 2008, Jonathan joined EnPro Industries as an environmental health and safety coordinator. Jonathan has held a variety of positions within the company and was just this year promoted to his current position. And with that, we would like to welcome your presenter, Jonathan.
Hi, and good afternoon. Thank you for joining the webinar. I just thought I'd take a moment to describe EnPro Learning and EnPro Industries for a moment so you can get an understanding and a perspective of where I'm coming from for today's conversation. We're going to be spending some time this afternoon talking about how to set up and sustain an effective and high-performing safety culture through the empowerment and engagement of your workforce through safety action teams or safety teams. My time within EnPro actually began at one of our divisions in New York, Garlock Sealing Technologies. We're a diversified manufacturing company that owns brands like Garlock, Technetics Group, Fairbanks Moore Ascension, CPI, and our safety hazard within the workplace is very real and very, very clear each and every day that we come to work. So we really had to focus on the key items, the key programs that were going to not only give us a safe workplace, but also help us create a culture of caring, sharing, and learning to lead us to a point of zero injury. So some of the experiences I'm going to be sharing with you today are derived from my experiences within EnPro and Garlock, as well as some of my colleagues throughout the business. To begin with, we're going to talk about a simple concept, and one that I'm sure many of you have heard before. People will support that which they help to create. And this particular quote was made pretty popular through Mary Kay Ash. This is one of the fundamental thought processes that she had in setting up her business throughout the U.S. And in her book, The Mary Kay Way, she actually goes on to further explain this concept. She says that when you dictate even the most thoughtful and logical concept to a person, the idea is still a command. When you ask her to contribute to its inception, that very same idea becomes a personal crusade. She suddenly feels a responsibility to ensure its success. And it's for that very reason that we have taken the approach of setting up safety action teams and multi-committee-based teams at all of our operations across the globe. We share the mentality and the sentiment that if our employees help create our safety system, if they help create our safety culture, they're going to support it. It's going to become their personal crusade. Creating a healthy and safe workplace to go to each and every day is something that all of our employees should be able to relate to, and the safety action teams really enable them to have an opportunity to get engaged and to make positive change within their workplace. A key for any strong safety culture is to have engagement and full participation from all within the organization. The culture cannot be sustainable if it's simply driven from the top, down, or owned by a small group of individuals within the organization. It is possible to see some successes through that, but long-term sustainable safety excellence is impossible to achieve without everyone in the organization playing a role and being engaged. That level of engagement is going to vary amongst all of the workers, but the system needs to be in place to allow individuals to come forward and contribute in their areas of strength. Not only is this an opportunity to hear the voices of all of your employees, but a multi-team structure also allows developmental opportunities for leaders and safety advocates throughout the business. Those leading teams can gather valuable leadership experience, and those participating in the teams get the development of working in teams. They get the development of regulatory knowledge or best practices, and they can grow and further mature their own safety ethic and leadership to help create that contagious culture throughout the entire workforce. This next slide simply shows an example of a comprehensive safety action team at one of our locations. The individual teams should be set up in a way that's most impactful for your business. So what you see up on the screen may not relate to your specific industry or your specific business. You know, for example, you may not have a fire emergency team, depending on what your company looks like, or maybe you don't have a standalone activities team that focuses on events. But I think you can understand the concept in that we really, within our own business, we strive to have more than one team in any location, and I'll explain that a little bit further on, but we really feel that one team can help perpetuate a problem that often comes about where that team either becomes so overwhelmed with the work that needs to be performed that they're really unable to make significant gains, or that team also just becomes the dumping ground for any concern, any idea, any initiative that comes out, and that really leads to the first problem. So we rely on our safety action teams to lead all sorts of programs, from incentive programs and training to full-on compliance items and emergency response. These teams own these programs. They are responsible for all the deliverables, all of the requirements that are set forth throughout the regulations. For instance, we have machine guarding teams at some of our plants, and they are in charge of ensuring proper machine guarding throughout the entire business, not just focusing on one area or another. These are not teams that come together and talk and have lunch. They are highly trained, highly functional teams that get together to drive action within the business. And you need to be very thoughtful and strategic in setting up your structure early on. Authority, expertise, accountability, leadership, and communication are some basic requirements that need to be in place for the teams to be effective. You need to begin by granting authority to the teams to make their workplace safer. I know that at times we can assume that teams know this or individuals in the business know this, but the authority must be expressly given, and leadership needs to support the actions of the team for them to truly understand that they have the ability to make change. Just simply saying once you are empowered to go out and make change probably isn't going to be enough depending on your situation. We're actually going to have to lead these teams through a couple of processes or projects to help them fully understand the level of authority and empowerment that the company has given them. Teams can get hung up on things like purchase pricing and reporting structures. For example, some employees might be hesitant to go out and purchase a $200 ladder, even though they know it's needed for the business, simply because in a personal life, a $200 ladder may not be a reality. But within the workplace, it's something that could easily be done. So, again, we have to help folks overcome some of these internal struggles by leading them through. It's very difficult as a conventional leader not to speak up if you think that the teams are struggling or they're moving in a direction other than what you believe. But that learning is really part of the process for team development. If we say we're going to give them the authority, sometimes we have to step back and allow those struggles to play out. We can offer support and guidance. We're obviously not going to let anything take place that would be detrimental to the business. But if they think a $50 fix is the solution, and they spend $50 and that works out not to be the solution, that's not the end of the world, right? It's a learning opportunity. They're going to learn from that mistake and move forward next time. But we have to allow these folks to actually exercise that authority and not come in and overrule the direction they're heading or take over that leadership role for them if we really want these teams to be leading the initiative throughout the workplace. Next is expertise. Team members need to have a solid education and training to be effective. We'll discuss this a little bit later, but a great deal of training needs to be performed when setting up the teams, how to work as a team, how to communicate with one another, and so forth. But there's also a need in many cases for specific expertise as it relates to the team charter. For example, members of a machine guarding team may need training on, what types of guards are out there. They might need some education on what are the anti-guidance factors. How do we go about finding those and utilizing those? How do we read and interpret OSHA regs and put those into practice in the workplace? But figuring out what people's passions are and allowing them the opportunities to work in those areas will help out the teams immensely. It's been amazing to me throughout the course of my career that no matter what location I go to, if you really sit down and talk to the employees, people have a wide variety of interests. I can think of a gentleman at our operation in New York. He learned that I came from a wind power background, and we struck up a conversation very early on in my time with Garlock. And this man was passionate about alternative energy and environmental initiatives, recycling, the farm, and he was installing geothermal and solar and wind. What better person to have on a team or leading a team that's focused on renewable energy or environmental issues at our site than this guy who clearly is passionate about it. He's taking it home to his everyday life. And this is one of our operators right off the floor. Great, great knowledge on the subject. He researched all sorts of grants and programs and really a great team member to the team. So really keep an eye out for folks like that. Have the conversations, learn what people's interests and passions are, and set them up for success within teams. Next, we need to make sure the teams have accountability, and there needs to be a system in place to make sure that things are running the way that they should be. We recommend that teams meet at a minimum once per month, although teams often meet more often than this, and that's usually for an hour per month, or an hour per meeting time anyway. But this is a basic requirement that has to be met. Teams cannot simply cancel a meeting because something comes up or a rush order came in. Letting meetings get pushed off or postponed sends a very clear message to the entire workforce, and that is that safety taking a back seat to whatever that issue is. Customer demand, a machine outage, whatever that is, we're sending a message when we're not making time for safety. And that, again, goes to the culture within the workplace. And it's going to be seen not just by the folks that are on the teams, but all the other employees that are out there. If they know these teams are in place and they're not actually making changes in the workplace, it's going to be readily evident throughout the entire organization. It's going to have a pretty negative impact on your culture. So leadership must make a commitment at the very beginning stages of this program that team meetings are important to the business and they must be held. If something really truly comes up and you have to cancel a meeting, it doesn't mean you just don't meet that month. Maybe you reschedule it for the next day or 2 days later, but you don't let time go by before you come back together as a team and hold that meeting. It gets really easy to fall in that trap of we push it off this month and next month, and next thing you know, it's been 6 months and the teams haven't been meeting and there's been no progress. So we need to make sure that we communicate those meetings as a core value of the business, and we're going to make sure that they happen. And one way to do that, we're going to talk a little bit about how to communicate this in a second, but one team to help drive the accountability, all teams should be recording their meeting minutes. And I know a lot of people say that their teams do, but really truly taking a good record of who's there, what we're discussing, what's new business, what's old business, what our takeaway, what we're going to be doing this week or this month, that's really important. What are our action items and who's responsible when they're going to get done? We need to make sure that we're recording those. And within our business, we want those shared with the entire workforce through a communication center, and I'll show you an example of that here in a few minutes. If those meeting minutes are not posted, or if it looks like not much action is going on within the teams, literally every employee within the business gets to see that, and they can help hold those teams accountable. Next is leadership. It's another fundamental requirement of teams and their members. All employees within the business will look to your safety action team members as leaders of the safety program. Whether they ask for that responsibility and visibility or not, it's going to be there, especially in the early stages of the program. And team members have to be safety leaders, and we spend a great deal of time educating all of our team members on not only what do we call safety leadership and how do we show that and practice it, but we also go into topics such as the 5 practices of exemplary leadership: model the way, inspire a shared vision, challenge the process, enable others to act, and encourage the heart. At the very beginning of team formation, organizational leadership gave the authority to teams to stop unsafe acts, conditions, and behaviors and to make their workplace safer. So these team members need to have the ability to lead safety in that way, each and every day, in and outside of the team meeting. And this is how the culture becomes infectious and starts to adopt others and really grow that high-performing culture where everybody's engaged. We cannot simply have people that go to the meetings to get an hour off the floor and maybe they contribute a little bit here and there, but then they go back to their daily tasks and take safety for granted. That's a very visible problem within our system. We need to make sure that everybody on these teams understands their level of visibility and accountability, and that their coworkers are looking to them not only for some guidance on safety matters perhaps, but also as a leader of the safety programs, and they're going to take their cues from how these members act within the workplace. Lastly, teams need to have the ability to communicate. There we go, slides up. So they need to be able to effectively communicate with one another, which again we'll talk about here in a few minutes, as well as the other employees within the business. But we should celebrate the successes that the teams have had, both as team members and as a company. By displaying the dedication, the efforts of the teams, and showing successes, other employees will be driven to participate. Oftentimes, from a safety perspective, a lot of communication that comes out tends to be of a negative, kind of a negative message. We've had this near miss happen, we had this first aid happen, we had this injury happen, or maybe sometimes it's a little bit more on the awareness side, but a lot of the communication can tend to be negative if all we're talking about are the failures or the things that have happened. And to take some time to focus on how employees have gotten engaged and improved their workplace and made the workplace safer for all, and to celebrate that really is essential to not only sustaining the teams, but also getting other employees engaged and involved in the program. So a little bit about how to set up the safety teams. It's a common question that I receive, and people are kind of wondering how to best set up the teams for their business. I'm having a little bit of trouble here getting the slide to move forward. So some of the criteria that we've established for our teams, and I think that most folks will agree with these items, but maybe have a couple more. I'd love to hear from them if you guys have some you'd like to send me. But when we try to set the teams, we really believe, again, first of all, in the multiple teams or committees. It really increases the number of people that can get engaged, increases developmental opportunities, and it really drives, again, that culture of everybody being engaged in the program. But for each of the teams that are established, we need to make sure that they're set up correctly and in a way that's going to allow them to function. So first and foremost, there should be a cross-functional representation on the team. So if you have an hourly and salary workforce or production and management or union, non-union, however you break it down, people always have some little way to break down their operations. But there needs to be participation from all different levels of the business. Doesn't matter if you're in customer service or inside sales or IT, or you're running a punch press or a sheeter mill or something like that on the floor. Everybody should have some involvement in the program, and we want to make sure that we set up the teams to represent that. We need to make sure that they are, appropriately staffed and trained for their tasks. For example, machine guarding team, again, without an engineer that can help design solutions would not be set up for a great deal of success. If they always had to reach to outside consultants, it might get costly, or maybe they would just get to a point where they couldn't go any further from a design standpoint and they'd get stuck. So we would make sure we have an engineer on the team. Having somebody that has the ability to make purchases, small purchases that the team needs, or somebody that has the ability to access a computer and pull up company policies and procedures, or set up meeting times, or save meeting minutes to a database, or send out emails to a broader group. Those things all need to be taken into consideration while you're setting up the team, so that they're not always having to go outside looking for additional assistance or help. And that can be somewhat flexible. If you set up a team and you realize that you've uncovered a gap that you haven't filled, that's fine. Let's recruit for that. Let's get somebody in and let's fill the gap. We don't have to get it perfect right off the bat. We can always add folks in and move folks around as the program sees fit. Again, we talked about some of this, but we need to make sure that there's communication methodology and systems in place for the teams to communicate, not only within the team for meeting times, but also externally to the other employees within the business. As a system manager or program manager, making sure people know how to get involved in the teams would be really essential. We have that information posted on our communication boards as well. And we're going to show here again in a minute how we document and communicate the meetings and the other documents that come out of the team meetings. So these are some of the basic guidelines that we try and stick to, but again, there might be some others that you guys have specific for your businesses. So some other basic structural items. I get this question a lot in terms of how big can a safety team be, and this is just, again, our thought. I mean, be large enough to be effective and allow for greater participation within the workforce, but they can't get so large that it's impossible to get consensus or for the teams to actually take action. So we recommend anywhere between 4 and 6 team members. You can go as high as maybe 6, 8, 10, depending on the scope of the team and what exactly they're working on. But if you really start getting much greater than that, it's going to be hard, number one, to get everybody there for the team meetings and to participate in the team. And then when you get to a point where you need consensus to move forward, again, that would be extremely difficult. We do have some businesses that are pretty small, small warehouse operations, small little engineering offices throughout the globe, and we don't want those facilities to not have a safety team in place. So they very well may only have 1 or 2 teams that involve all employees of the business. So those teams might be a little bit larger, but again, they're focused on all of the items that relate to that particular operation. So each individual might have a specific assignment, a waste side of things or a machine guarding side of things or HAZCOM or whatever that is. So those teams might get a little larger, but again, they would all have specific tasks to be focused and oriented on. We like for each of the teams to be co-led. Usually it's by one of our business leaders and one of the safety advocates or champions from the operation floor. It's a great developmental opportunity for any future leader of the business. We want them to spend time on the safety action team. They have to spend some time in that area to, again, help develop their ethic on safety, but we want our frontline supervisors, we want our managers, we want them leading these teams and being successful, because if they want to move on in our business to director level, vice president, whatever that is, they need to have that core fundamental safety ethic and value that comes about through participation on these teams. So we want our operational leaders to spend some time in a leadership role, but we also want our frontline employees to spend time in a leadership role. And these leadership roles will rotate over time, whether that's every 2 years or every 3, whatever your time scale is. We look usually about every 2 years or so to rotate new folks in and, again, provide those developmental opportunities and leadership opportunities. But we really want to have one from, again, the business leadership side as well as the frontline operations. And that gives a backup in case somebody can't be there, but it really gives an opportunity to work one-on-one really closely with some of our strongest employees on the floor and help develop them in these areas of leadership and safety. I don't want to spend a great deal of time focused on these requirements, so I'm going to kind of move on. They've been up there for a little while, but I, again, wanted to kind of throw them out here for a minute because they are essential not only to the team success, but also, again, in the culture. So looking at some of these meeting guidelines, you may not think too much about how they might have an impact on the culture of the business, but they can. First and foremost, scheduling. Again, teams need to stick to their schedules. They need to hold the meetings when they say they're going to hold the meetings. Again, we practice communicating out when those meeting time frames are. So, again, everybody should know when they should be going on. So to not have a meeting that could be public knowledge. But the second bullet here is also really important. Start and end on time. And we make a commitment to the teams to be there when we say we're going to be there, but we have commitments to our coworkers to be back and in our day-to-day operations when we say we're going to be back. And one of the most common complaints I've heard in operations as I've traveled there is we have people that are not engaged in the safety teams, and there can be a level of resentment that comes up that, man, John, he's supposed to be down here, but he's in safety meetings all day. He's supposed to be gone for an hour, but ends up being an hour and a half to 2 hours, and here I am picking up all the slack. That's starting to create a pretty negative perception within the workforce when it doesn't need to be there. When we set up a meeting time, we start on time, we end on time. We're respectful not only to our team members by getting there ready to go right off the bat, but we're respectful to our coworkers to getting back and doing what needs to be done from our normal day-to-day operations. If a meeting needs to run long, that's okay. Let's take a break. Let's go back. Let's communicate that to the people that might be affected. Let's come back together and finish up what we need to do. But to not have that communication can really start to set up some negative perceptions in people's minds. So I just lost my place here just a second. Get input from each and every employee. This is a really important thing to do. Some people are natural leaders, and they're going to gravitate more towards those leadership roles and be more vocal in the team meetings, and some people are more comfortable kind of hanging out in the background, but they have really great ideas. I know they do, and we need to sometimes help push people a little bit to bring those ideas forward. So whether you're in a leadership position or whether you're training your teams and setting them up, make sure you spend some time talking about how to get those folks that might not naturally come forward to be comfortable, to share, and to be engaged. I know you're going to get some great ideas. You got to listen to them, and you really got to entertain all ideas because sometimes the most off-the-wall things, really end up to be the most successful. If any of you have joined other webinars I've done in the past or come to one of our events, you may have heard me share a story about one of our safety team leaders asking me to go purchase 2 mannequins off of Craigslist, and they're just gray foam mannequins, and I really didn't understand what the purpose was, but they wanted them, so we went and we purchased them, brought them back, and within a couple of weeks, the first event, if you will, was set up. And what this team was doing is they were using these mannequins to set up mock near-miss incidents or mock first aid incidents or just some way to communicate a safety opportunity to all the employees in the workforce. So, for example, pulling into the plant one day, it was in the winter months up here in New York, so there's snow, and here's this mannequin in a full parka and pants and boots and a hat, and he's positioned as if he's slipping on the ice, and he's got yellow barricade tape around him and stuff, but there's all these handouts that go with him about, taking care and walking safely on snow and ice. And before anybody got out of their cars that day, it was just a great visual cue that, hey, it's cold, it's slippery, we need to take some care. And then when people came up to look at it and, really try to appreciate what had been done, there's some additional literature and things there. And so that's what I mean when I say entertain all ideas. If John Neubauer, I would not have just gone out and bought 2 mannequins. That idea came from a team, and even though I didn't understand it, it turned out to be probably the best $250 we ever spent from a safety hazard communication perspective, and it was just a fantastic project that really resulted in a lot of great benefits for us. But just make sure we open our minds to some of those off-the-wall ideas. I can share some others with you if we've got time a little bit later. So here's an example of the communication centers that we talked about. We set up somewhere along the wall in a high traffic area. Each team is given a section of space, and we ask that they have a team photo along with a roster, so that way everybody in the organization knows who's on what team. And not only do they have a name, but they have a face. I'm not sure how all of your businesses operate, but some of our businesses are pretty large, and it's really hard to know everybody that works there, especially in other departments. But if you have a picture with a name and a face, it's really easy. I could walk up there and say, okay, I've got a question on a HAZCOM. I'm going to go to somebody on the education and training team, and then, there's a name, there's a face. I know exactly who to go and seek out with my question if I have that. So those are 2 of the requirements that we have. We also ask that they post their charter. I'm going to talk about this a little bit later, but each team develops their own charter and really work through how they're going to operate on their own as a team, and we want that to be posted for all to see. And we also want the last month's meeting minutes as well as any action item communications that need to be put out, such as, here's an opportunity we're working on, here's who's responsible, the due date, that sort of thing. But any employee should be able to walk up, know exactly what every single team is working on, what they discussed last month, where they are in their communicated goals and objectives for the year, and it's just a one-stop place for all that information. Not directly related to the action teams, but in these areas we typically also post things like, a hazard map that you'll see on the left-hand side where we plot out all of our near misses or safety opportunities across the drawing of the shop floor, but also our injury tracker posters up there on the top left of the traffic light. That's just a great means to put stickers on the body for where the injuries occurred, a brief description, a great visual means to communicate what's going on from an injury perspective. So rough idea of what our communication centers would look like. And this is just another example of the visual accountability. So in this case, it's an audit and inspections team. They broke down all the audits that need to be completed each month. And if it's not done, it'd be very easy to see on this board that one of those departments or one of those teams missed an inspection, and great way to hold them accountable, make sure it gets done. But again, accountability is key. We can't let teams get into this routine of coming together and talking and maybe discussing a little bit, but not actually getting things done. We refer to them as safety action teams for a reason. They're all about action and getting things done. So accountability is key, and a great way to do that is through these visual means. We also have another method I'll talk about here a little bit later, which is a report out to the interested parties on what each team is doing on a quarterly basis. So one of the first opportunities to help develop the culture through the action teams is right at the initial team setup. We allow our teams to develop their own charters, like I said a moment ago, and that includes all the items that you see on this screen. They're going to define what are the roles and responsibilities, what are their team priorities, what are their action items going to be, what resources do they need in terms of training or education or maybe some tools. They're going to schedule their own meetings and be reviewing the action items and maintaining the visual management. But they really need to take that ownership role. These are not established by the management team. We may give them a direction, such as this is going to be the accident investigation team, but how exactly that team is defined and how they operate comes about through a guided setup with those teams. So it really is on them to create the team that they want to work on. And it's the first opportunity for those team members to create the team, so it helps sustain it and support it moving forward. They are empowered to create the team and team requirements as they see fit. This process can be challenging, and I recommend having somebody in there to help facilitate, not lead the discussions, but facilitate the discussions. And it may take a couple of meetings to work through, and as a facilitator and safety manager, if you're still in that role, you'll need to ensure that the charter of the team is moving in the direction of the organization, that all these teams are moving towards that same common goal. For example, if an incident investigation team developed a charter that said something along the lines of, the accident investigation team has been established to reduce recordable injuries through prompt investigation of all medical treatment cases and lost time cases, I, as a safety manager of that business, would probably have to challenge that team a little bit to see if they're really truly spending their time in the right area. I would ask some questions for them, such as, what truly is a responsibility accident investigation team? When should the team really get involved? What's the difference between a first aid and a recordable? What about first aid? What about near misses? And try to groom the thinking of the group to come more in line with a charter that might help support the value and the goal of the business to be zero injury. I don't think you get there by focusing only on medical treatment cases or recordable cases and lost time cases. So maybe that charter would change to be something along the lines of, the accident investigation team has been established to help ABC company become the safest manufacturer in the world. The team will accomplish this through prompt and thorough investigation of every incident in the workplace, from near misses to serious injuries. Focus of the team will be primarily on near misses and safety opportunities. As we know, prompt resolution of these will eliminate the potential for serious accidents, something along those lines. But changing the focus and the thinking of the team to be more along that visionary level of really getting zero injury, there might need to be some guidance on that, some facilitation on that during these team meetings. So I'll leave this up here for just a couple seconds. Brief visual of a meeting minutes form. It's probably pretty small and hard to see on your screen, but if you want a copy of it, feel free to reach out to myself via email or contact us through the website, and we can get this over to you. It's really nothing special, just a basic meeting minutes form, but there's some folks that may not have collected minutes for their team meetings before, and I wanted to at least provide an example of that. And likewise, here's an example of some of the assignment documents that the teams help create. And again, this might be a little difficult for you to see on your screens, but this is an assignment that came, out of a fire emergency team. And what they did is they took all of their compliance items and they broke those out by month to make sure that they completed all of the necessary items each and every year, and we maintain compliance with each item. So the only way to make sure that that was sustainable and something they could do year after year after year was they set up a calendar, and this is how they go about taking care of those items. And again, this is posted, so if something was not completed by the assigned date, it would be very visible for anybody in the business to see and make sure that the corrective measure was put in place to get us where we need to be. As I said a little bit earlier, extensive training needs to be performed for all team members as the teams are set up. And you cannot simply just take a group of people and place them in a room with a topic and expect them to be effective, right? So we need to spend some time training all members on how to communicate with one another, how to resolve conflict, how to give and receive feedback. That's not an easy thing to have happen in the workplace, in my experience nowadays. People really struggle with how to communicate effectively with one another, how to operate within a team. So some basic training and time spent on this is really going to pay off in the long run. And when we set up these teams, it's not like an hour or two of training. It's usually a couple of days and not even focusing on the subject matter of the team yet, but just simply giving them the training they need to be effective team members and to be able to effectively communicate with one another and get along and actually move forward and take a step as a team. We spend a great deal of time in that area. These are fundamental skills to working in a team, and some people have simply not had much exposure to this in their lifetime. We also run our members through a safety leadership training. So if you take a look at our website, you've seen things like our safety summits, and it's a variant of that. We really want all of our team members, again, to really understand what does it mean to be a safety leader? What does it mean to model the way? What does it mean to inspire a shared vision? And again, the faces of the program once these teams are set up. So we spend a great deal of time in that area. And it's really geared towards helping them develop their own internal ethic and value for safety and teach them how to lead through that value and help inspire others in the workplace to get engaged and get on board with the program. So I'm not sure if that top bullet there relates to anybody, volunteer or voluntold, but I've long been asked if the leaders of the teams should be assigned to the responsibility or if it should be volunteer only. And I really think that is up to you, depending on where your business is at. If you've already got a culture where people are stepping forward to volunteer for a leadership role as well as be on a team, then great. You've got part of the problem solved. But in many cases, when you're just starting out, you may need to delegate or designate some of our leaders to lead the teams. Give them an assignment, and it should be treated just as if it were any other project in the workplace, an improvement idea, or Kaizen, or whatever it was, quality initiative. That if they're going to be leading a team, that should be in their review process and something they should be held accountable to. We don't want them to start slipping up on leading teams because they're trying to spend all the time focusing on the things that are going to be discussed at their mid-year or year-end review. So if we want them to have equal time, make sure that we set it up the right way so that way the leaders are motivated to not only through the ethic, but also from the standpoint that they're going to get credit for all the work that they've done when it comes to review time. Another way of having some accountability here within the teams, and this is one that I think can be a lot of fun, and it's really important to help make sure that all the teams are on the same page, but we really ask that all the teams do a quarterly report out. And I think I failed to mention on some slides earlier that usually there's a steering team that's set up that oversees and provides direction and oversight for the strategy of where all these teams are headed working together. Usually that's site leadership and union leadership, employee leadership, that sort of thing that sit on those teams. But every quarter, each team should put together a brief presentation on what they've accomplished, what their goals are for the next quarter, and they should report out to not only that steering team and some other key members of the leadership team perhaps, but also the members of the other teams. It's really important for the teams to know what each other are working on so that way you don't have duplication of efforts, you don't have conflicts going on between teams. So having those report outs is a great way to communicate what everybody's doing, where everybody's going, how they can work together, and how they can be strategic in taking care of those items. Just wait for the slide to pop up. So again, you need to keep teams meaningful and relevant to your business. From a sustainability perspective, if you've got a team in place that really is not needed, then why are you spending time there? And likewise, maybe you had something pop up, a big project that maybe you're near miss that brought a big issue to light and you need to have tackled right away. Why not set up teams that are project-based and move them in and out of the program? This should be a fluid type of system, in my opinion. Teams can be formed for a short period of time, go out there and blitz an area and really take control and put some corrections in place, and then disband for a while and maybe come together in another area, maybe get absorbed into other teams. But just make sure that you're constantly taking a look at the program, assessing how it's operating and how it's doing, and then making corrections from there. Again, celebrating successes, just wanted to share some thoughts on these. I do think it's important to acknowledge the individuals as well as the team and the organization. And I think that sometimes those individual acknowledgments can mean so much than a meal or a shirt for a team or some award for the site. We initiated a program a couple of years ago, the simple thank you cards from our division presidents. And they would send out handwritten thank you cards to the homes of employees that really took the leadership initiative within our safety programs. And I clearly recall one of the gentlemen that received it at one of the plants I was managing. He'd been with us for 30 some odd years. And he came into my office. He asked if I knew that he was going to receive it, and of course I did. But he broke down crying in my office, and it's the first time that he'd ever been thanked for his efforts as an employee of the business. And he was with us for 30 years. It meant a great deal to him and really helped drive him and really motivated him to continue not only in the safety teams but in other areas of the business as well. So when you look at celebration and acknowledgments, it doesn't have to be a thank you card. I don't think things like gift cards and stuff speak as strongly as a more personal approach for the individual rewardings and incentives, but I really think it's important to focus on the individual and on the teams and on the organization as you go through celebrating successes. Lastly, one more slide here before we move on to kind of a close up and do some Q&A, but I hear this all the time. We've always done it this way. And when it comes to safety action teams, I think that can get thrown around a little bit more often than even in some other areas. For instance, we've always had one team, and that's the way we've managed it. Well, has that one team been effective enough to really get you to zero injury and safety excellence? And I would probably challenge it more times than not. That's not the case. Maybe our scheduling does not allow us to meet as teams the way our operating schedule is set up, or we just don't have the time to meet. We don't have the resources to meet. We really have to think outside the box. And instead of focusing on all the reasons why we can't implement the system or why we can't spend the time necessary, let's figure out ways so we can. Maybe we have to fundamentally change the way we do business if we truly want to see the cultural change in the workplace. So just wanted to kind of close out with that thought, keep an open mind, and really challenge the process. So again, just kind of a wrap up on EnPro Learning System. So again, we're basically an offshoot of a manufacturing company. We offer some safety leadership training through safety summits. You see those dates down on the lower right-hand side coming up in Denver as well as out in Columbia. Behavior-based safety products, safety first. We have some training events coming up in the upper right-hand corner with the next one taking place in LA towards the end of January here, the 26th, 27th. Would love to see you at any of those. And I think there's a great video on our website there at www.enprolearning.com. If you get into the safety videos, there's a segment from a panel discussion of one of our safety summits, and it's of our frontline operators at our plant down in Columbia, South Carolina. And if you want to just hear a little bit from a team that I think really represents this culture that I'm speaking about, just caring, sharing, and learning, I'd encourage you to go to the website, go to the videos, and check that out. I thought about including the presentation, but I know last time we had some difficulty making that happen. So with that, I guess I'll hand it back over to Michelle and see if we've got any questions that we can answer.
Great. Thank you, Jonathan. Great presentation. Just a note to the attendees, if you do have any questions, please feel free to submit them into the Q&A tab, and we will try to answer these during the Q&A session. If not, we will follow up after the webinar. First question, Jonathan. What is the difference between a safety champion and a committee leader?
Well, a committee leader could simply just be somebody that's been assigned to lead a committee, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're a champion of safety, in my opinion. We spend a great deal of time in our summits and our other programs talking about safety and leadership. We have this progression chart that we kind of speak to that goes from compliance to supporter into champion and visionary level safety. So what I think of in a champion is somebody that, you know, they understand the importance of safety, not only to the business and from a compliance standpoint, but the value of our employees as people, as human beings, and that injuries are simply not an acceptable thing in part of business today. That if we cannot operate a business without injuring them, we need to change the business. That fundamental mindset has to be in the minds of the champions. They have to be thinking about safety from a different perspective. You know, mentality that, well, that's just a silly accident, or you know, injuries are going to happen as part of our business. Those thoughts should not be going through the minds of a visionary safety leader and probably a champion safety leader, in my opinion. These are the folks that really need to help folks see beyond the normal lines of thinking. So maybe your team leaders are those safety champions, but oftentimes we need to develop folks both in a leadership perspective as well as a safety leadership perspective or safety champion perspective.
Great, thank you. Next question. I have safety committee meetings for 4 shifts, 5 employees per shift. Do you think that's okay, or should I just have one more meeting?
I'm not quite sure I understand, but it sounds like there's individual teams on each shift, and each of those teams has 5 people on it. That sounds like a great structure to me to make sure that all of the shifts have a voice in what's going on. I would just make sure that there's a really strong communication system in place for all those teams, so that way they all learn from one another and they all know what each other are working on, and that can sometimes be extremely difficult on shift work. Come from a business that have 24-hour shifts, and making sure we communicate to one another across all shifts can be challenging. So I would say that would probably be the biggest key there. If your question was, should you just have one safety team that covers all those shifts, I think that you probably got a better approach right now, because you're going to have a great deal more participation, right? 20 folks versus maybe 5 or 8, and you're getting input from all the shifts. So if I understood the question correctly, that would be my response.
Great, thank you very much. Next question. Do you recommend a safety professional chairing a safety committee? Why or why not?
They can, but I am not a big advocate for it, to be honest, and the main reason being is that inevitably the team will just look to that person as the end-all, be-all from a knowledge perspective, and that they kind of just look to that person as whatever they say should go, because they're the EHS person or the safety professional. They should know more than anybody else. So from that perspective, I think it can create some conflict. However, I have seen some safety professionals that are able to overcome that very easily and encourage everybody else to participate and to step back when they're being drawn too much upon, and really make sure that the entire team is engaged. So it is not a definitive no, they can't lead a team. I just, in my experience, I prefer not to have our EHS professionals lead teams and rather be a resource to the teams as necessary. The other thing I've commonly seen is that the safety person or professional basically chair every team, and then all they're doing is trying to juggle all the work, and we really haven't gotten the true engagement out of the workforce where we're spreading the responsibility, we're getting all these people involved to help carry the workload and help develop the culture, and it still ends up falling on one person or one department of people. So I guess my long-winded answer would be no. I tend to not have them in leadership roles of teams, but the right individuals can definitely do that and be highly effective as well.
Okay, and which tool would you use within the safety committee to prove that investing in safety financially gives a good ROI? There's a lot of different calculations out there, and some of you guys might hate me for saying this on the webinar, but in our business, I've never had to do that. I guess one approach, our approach would be
making sure that the leadership of the business is on board from a value perspective. Within our business, it's not about the money. It's not about the savings. It's about the fact that these are people, and we need to protect people because we care about them, and they've got families to go home to. And once you create that value, the questions of ROI tend to start going away on some of the smaller type things. But everybody has their own cost justification systems, every company does, but there are definitely measures that you can put in place, calculations that you can utilize. A little hard to describe in this forum, to be honest. They don't have a specific tool to reference, but a lot of folks obviously try to justify reduction of injuries and the cost of those injuries and how that'll offset the cost of whatever initiative you're trying to put into place. But really, if in my businesses, I've always tried to stress the conversations of why are we going to make these improvements to begin with, and if we really root ourselves in that why, then the reasoning financially behind it becomes a lot easier because you don't need to make that argument. But again, so folks, I might be getting some bad looks from people to the phone for saying something like that, but I've never had to justify an expense within our businesses from a safety perspective.
Great. Thank you again, Jonathan. Next question. My safety committee consists of 25 employees. We have not broken down into smaller groups that are focused on particular areas in safety, but we have close to 600 employees and 13 total buildings. Do I need to break the committee down more?
I would suggest yes, because just really quick snapshot of the company. It relates very closely to one of the businesses I'm very familiar with within our own company, from a number of buildings and layout as well as the population size. And I really struggled when I first came to that business. We had a handful of teams and a small number of people engaged. And what we really had to do was reevaluate our program, and we ended up creating basically, I'll see if I can push the slide to you guys, with the safety team structure that we covered early on. We basically set up a system very similar to what you see on the screen in each and every one of our departments, which were typically in the building. So that way we were able to get more involvement, and they were able to focus on things in their own backyard, if you will. So I don't know exactly how your business is set up, but within this particular business within EnPro, each department kind of had its own building, and they could all have between 100 and 150 employees, give or take. So they were kind of like their own small independent businesses. So each one of those departments had a structure set up, a multi-committee based. We found that people really got more engaged with focusing on fixing things in their department, because within our business, if you work in the dialogue department, you may never venture down to the expansion joints building. There's no reason for you to go down there. You kind of don't even know it exists. And therefore, if the team is tasked with working on something in EJ, or expansion joint, that particular point may not really be that engaged because they don't understand anything about that business or how it's going to benefit the workplace. So I guess my recommendation would probably be break it down, whether that's departmentally or building-wise or however that would be, try to solicit some more involvement. Is kind of an idea. I believe the site I'm referring to now, we had in the neighborhood of 22 different teams in the neighborhood of 150 to 200 employees, or about a third of the workforce on just safety teams. So if that kind of gives you an idea of how much we broke it down, there's some numbers to think about.
Great. And in your experience, what are some indicators and metrics that you think are a good measure of a safety culture?
Well, I think we have to overcome the focus on the reactive metrics, whether that's workers' compensation costs or recordable or lost time or even first aid. Near misses are kind of transitional, right? We've had something happen that didn't lead to an injury, but we spend an awful lot of time focusing on things like number of training hours per month per employee on average, number of safety opportunities reported and corrected, days to completion for a near miss or a safety opportunity item that's been turned in, or percentage closed out within 7 days or 30 days, whatever metric you want to use. If you start talking of behavioral-based safety side of things, how many observations have been performed, how many leadership observations have been performed. That's one of the big components of our behavior-based safety tool, is not just focusing on the behaviors of our frontline employees, but the behaviors and actions of our leaders of the business. those are just some things that come right to mind. But if you start collecting metrics on the things that you want to see, such as increased training, increased participation, those are the results that you'll see if you start measuring those items. So that's really what we focus on the proactive side in terms of metrics.
Great, thank you. Next question. I work at a company of around 150 factory workers. We run very lean. How do I get production leaders to buy into a safety team when pulling them off the floor for an hour where there may not be someone out there to take the committee member's place?
Can wholeheartedly understand that, and I know this is going to come across as kind of a sales pitch, and I don't mean it that way, but I really truly think that our safety summits are a great way to help folks overcome that particular challenge or thought process. And during these summits, what makes them so effective is that we take you to one of our plants, and you get to hear from the employees on the floor, and we bring the employees from the floor back to the hotel that we're at, and you actually get to have a Q&A panel with them. And we also have business leaders there, and all of these businesses where we have a high-performing safety culture, guess what? They're a high-performing business because it's about getting the engagement of your workforce and empowering them and giving them the authority to not only make the workplace safer, but make it more efficient, improve our quality. Really, by getting the engagement of the workforce, you're going to see the benefits on the other side of the business. And we have some businesses that can show you numbers and experiences, but to be there and experience and hear it from the employees firsthand and get to see how the business operates is really an impactful experience. But again, these teams are going to yield so many benefits to the business beyond safety improvements. But we're giving the workforce an opportunity to have a voice and help create the place that they want to work. And if you have a happy employee who's engaged in what's going on, they're going to be producing results for the business in all sorts of areas. So I don't have a specific way to help you through that, other than really try to benchmark with companies out there that have done it, and that can show you that not only can we take the time to talk about safety, but we actually became more profitable and more efficient as a result of taking time away from the floor, which is kind of counterintuitive, but it really does work.
Great, and it looks like we have time for about one more question. So here it is. Do you prefer a computer-based safety training or instructor-led safety training, or a combination? Why or why not?
I would typically use a combination in my experience. There's some topics that I think that we can communicate through computer-based training if it's pretty straightforward stuff. But really nothing more than compliance side of things, in my opinion. But I really truly am more of an advocate for human-led training, and there's a multitude of reasons for that. But first and foremost, just looking at the way adults learn, right? Computer-based training doesn't necessarily give you an avenue to do all that. And you can sometimes hear it and see it, but sometimes you can't do it. And in other systems, you have the ability to kind of do all three. But having that human-led training, I think, can be so much more effective, especially when we start talking about the area of the safety programs that people don't spend an awful lot of time in, and that's the internal value or ethics side of the business or side of the program. You can't teach that through a computer. You can't teach how to develop that core value of safety through a computer or a program. So it might be okay for some, but I'm sure you guys have all done it too. Online training classes of some way, shape, or form, and I find them really hard to get engaged in. Whereas you put me in a classroom with an engaging instructor or presenter, and I'm going to learn a lot more in that particular way. So my preference would be person-led training.
Great, thank you, Jonathan. It looks like that is all the time we have today for questions. We just wanted to let the attendees know that we will be capturing everything, and we can follow up with you after the close of today's webinar. So thank you so much, Jonathan, for a great presentation, and thank you to each of our attendees for joining us today. For everyone who joined us via audio, please note at the conclusion of this webcast, you will see an exit survey. In an effort to make each of our webcasts beneficial to you, we would appreciate your input. You will also receive an email following the webcast that will contain a link to the recording and program materials. EHS Daily Advisor and EnPro Learning System would like to thank you again for joining us today. This concludes our program.